Welcome to the deep dive. If you are sitting there listening to this with a mountain of highlighters, half-read textbooks, and just a stack of flashcards threatening to topple over onto your laptop.
A very familiar scene for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. The authors of the document we're looking at today are essentially speaking directly to your situation. You are likely on a quest to learn smarter, not harder, right?
Right. Trying to figure out how to navigate massive amounts of information without completely losing your mind in the process.
Exactly. It can feel completely overwhelming, honestly, like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon.
It is a remarkably common scenario for anyone facing a major test. The sheer volume of material you're expected to consume and eventually reproduce can trigger a real sense of panic.
Yeah, panic is the word.
And unfortunately, that panic usually leads to the worst possible study habits, like those marathon reading sessions that don't actually move the needle at all.
Which brings us to the focus of today's deep dive. We are pulling our insights from a set of source materials titled The Strategic Blueprint for AP Exam Mastery.
It's a really fascinating document.
It is. Now, to be clear right up front, we aren't here to endorse this as the absolute only valid way to study, nor are we taking a side on the best overarching educational philosophies out there.
Right, we're keeping it neutral.
Yep. Our goal today is simply to impartially unpack the specific arguments the authors of this text are making so you can evaluate the ideas and decide if this framework is useful for your own prep.
And the core argument of this blueprint is pretty bold. They're saying a strategy-first approach matters infinitely more than raw brute force memorization.
Okay, let's unpack this. The authors want to treat test prep like a strategic game, a puzzle to solve, rather than just a punishing grind.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the authors argue this mindset shift is crucial because success on massive assessments like AP tests relies on three interconnected pillars.
Oh, yeah, three pillars.
First is mastering the content, which, most people hyper-focus on. But the second is developing actual test-taking skills. And the third is managing your time effectively.
So content, skills, and time.
Exactly. The blueprint suggests that if you ignore any single one of those pillars, your score will suffer. It doesn't matter how exceptionally well, the historical dates or the scientific formulas.
Because it's not just a trivia contest.
Right. These exams are designed to test reasoning, analysis, and the ability to apply knowledge in real time under pressure. They are not simply testing the ability to parrot back isolated facts crammed the night before.
That is a really interesting distinction to make right away. Parroting facts versus actually applying knowledge. And that introduces the first major theme of the text, Know Thy Enemy.
I love that title.
It's great. The guide specifically advises understanding the entire architecture of the exam before you even open a single textbook. But I have to say, the authors throw around a lot of alphabet soup here.
Oh, they definitely do.
They mention MCQs, FRQs, DBQs, LEQs, SAQs. I mean, for someone not steeped in this terminology, what is the actual difference in how these formats test your brain?
It's a fair question because the acronyms can be blinding. Essentially, MCQ stands for multiple choice questions, and FRQ is free response questions.
Got it. Standard stuff.
But within those free responses, you have DBQs, which are document-based questions, LEQs, long essay questions, and SAQs, short answer questions.
Okay, so a whole spectrum of written responses.
Exactly. The source uses the AP US History exam, APUSH, as a prime example of why you need to know the difference. The text points out that the MCQs focus heavily on factual knowledge and basic reasoning.
Right.
But when you move to the DBQs, the rules of the game fundamentally change. A DBQ provides you with historical documents and tests your ability to form a complex historical argument using those specific sources.
So you can't just brain dump everything you know.
No, not at all. If you walk into a DBQ thinking it's just a long-form trivia test where you list everything you know about the Civil War, you are going to miss the mark entirely. You have to understand the architecture of the specific question type.
So if we accept that reasoning and argumentation beat raw recall on those sections, how do we actually figure out what the test wants us to study? The authors keep referencing this acronym, the CED.
Yes, the CED.
They treat it like it's the ultimate treasure map for test prep.
The CED stands for the course and exam description. And the authors are adamant that it's basically hiding in plain sight. Every single AP subject has one published by the College Board.
So anyone can just go download this.
Absolutely. The blueprint argues that the CED explicitly outlines the highest yield units and the most commonly tested concepts. It literally gives you the scoring weights for the test.
That seems incredibly useful.
It is. For instance, it might tell you that a specific historical era is worth 15% of your final score, while another is only worth 4%.
Oh, wow.
That weighting directly dictates your time allocation. You prioritize the sections that carry the most weight to maximize your return on investment. The text advises cross-checking your class notes against this CED to create a definitive master list of must-know content.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Because the blueprint explicitly says to ruthlessly skip excessive textbook tangents if they don't align with the CED.
They do say that.
Isn't that incredibly risky for a student? What if a well-meaning teacher spent a whole week lecturing on a specific obscure battle and it shows up on the test? How does the guide justify completely ignoring assigned material?
It definitely feels counterintuitive to a diligent student. However, the author's justification comes down to mathematical probability and return on investment.
Oh, okay. How so?
Yes, a rogue multiple-choice question about an obscure battle might appear, but that single question is worth a fraction of a point. The time you'd spend memorizing hundreds of obscure details just to catch that one point.
It could be spent somewhere else.
Exactly. It could be spent mastering a major thematic trend that forms the basis of an essay worth 25% of your grade. This raises an important question that the blueprint asks learners to consider. How much precious time are you currently wasting memorizing isolated facts? The text argues that high-level assessments test your ability to synthesize information. The focus should be on trends, cause and effect relationships, and major concepts rather than encyclopedic trivia.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because once you have that CED master list, you have to actually sit down and learn it. And the blueprint explicitly calls for the total death of passive review.
The total death.
Yeah. They argue that highlighting your textbook or rereading your notes for the 5th time is a complete waste of hours. So if we are ditching the highlighters, what is the alternative they're offering here?
The alternative is active recall. The guide strongly recommends tools like flashcards, but with a caveat. They can be physical index cards or digital platforms.
Like Quizlet.
Yeah, the text specifically mentions digital tools like Quizlet, which most students know, and Anki. Anki is particularly interesting because it utilizes a spaced repetition algorithm.
Spaced repetition. How does that work?
It tracks how well you know a specific card and purposely shows it to you right at the exact moment your brain is about to forget it, which maximizes retention.
That's incredibly efficient.
Very. But whether physical or digital, the rule is that these flashcards must be focused strictly on concepts, key terms, and the connections between them, rather than just long paragraphs of text.
I can see how that forces you to engage. But why are the authors so aggressively against rereading notes? It feels like reading is studying.
The text cites a deep well of analytical backing for this stance. The authors point out a phenomenon known as the fluency illusion.
The fluency illusion.
Yes. When you reread a page of your own notes, your brain experiences fluency. The words feel familiar. So you trick yourself into believing you have mastered the material.
Oh, I've definitely done that. You read it and think, yeah, I know this.
Right. But familiarity is not mastery. Self-quizzing, the act of actively retrieving information from your brain without looking at the source, strengthens memory exponentially more than passive reading.
Because it's harder.
Exactly. Only by forcing your brain to struggle to retrieve the information do you actually cement the neural pathways required to recall it later under the pressure of a timed exam.
That distinction between the fluency illusion and actual mastery makes a lot of sense. And the blueprint offers a really fascinating diagnostic tool to figure out which one you actually have, the pretend to teach others method.
One of the best strategies in there?
They suggest that you should try to explain complex concepts aloud, completely from memory. You could talk to a peer, explain it to a family member while they're making dinner, or even just record a voice memo on your phone and listen back to it.
The authors highlight this as the ultimate test of true understanding. When you pretend to teach or actually teach someone, it forces a very specific cognitive process. You must simplify multifaceted concepts into digestible explanations.
You can't hide behind the jargon.
Exactly. It completely strips away your ability to hide behind academic jargon. If you were explaining the economic impacts of the Industrial Revolution to your little brother, you can't just read textbook definitions.
Right, he wouldn't understand it.
And the brilliant part is the immediate feedback loop. If you stumble, lose the thread, or find yourself saying, you know what I mean.
Which we all do.
Right. It instantly reveals a gap in your knowledge. The blueprint's rule of thumb is harsh but true. If you cannot explain it clearly to a layperson, you likely do not understand it fully.
Okay, so let's say a learner has mapped the exam using the CED, they've ditched the highlighters, they are using spaced repetition flashcards, and they are teaching concepts aloud to their dog.
A very educated dog.
Very. How does the blueprint structure the final approach to the exam date? They introduce something called the 4-week countdown model, but what does that actually look like in practice, week by week?
The 4-week model is an execution strategy designed to transition you from learning to performing. According to the text, week 1 is heavily focused on targeted content review based on your weakest CED units, mixed with untimed practice questions.
Don't untime, just getting a feel for it.
Right. You are just trying to get the formatting down.
Yeah.
Week 2 shifts the balance. You are still reviewing content, but you start incorporating time drills for the free response questions.
Okay, turning up the heat a bit.
Then, week 3 is where the training wheels come off. You're taking full-length, timed sections and drastically reducing your reliance on notes.
And the final week?
By week 4, the text states you should be shifting almost entirely to independent recall and full exam simulation. You shouldn't be learning new material in week 4. You should be executing what you know.
That transition away from the safety net of open notes sounds stressful, but the authors emphasize that simulating the real thing is non-negotiable. They advocate for taking full-length practice exams under strict conditions. 0 distractions, phone in another room.
It's critical.
They mention using official released exams or credible digital platforms like Blue Book, which is the College Board's own digital testing app, or Note, a popular study platform. But why is the simulation aspect so heavily prioritized over just checking if you know the right answers?
Because you are training your physical and mental endurance, not just your memory. The blueprint argues that the psychological pressure of the ticking clock can cause even the most prepared student to blank.
So it's about managing the stress response.
Yes. By simulating the strict, timed conditions, you are building the pacing required to survive a 3-hour exam. You are essentially acclimatizing your brain to perform under duress so that when exam day arrives, the environment feels routine rather than shocking.
Speaking of performing under duress, there is a section in the text that sounds almost like a cheat code, and it has to do with how the exams are actually graded. The authors call it rubric language, or cracking the task verbs.
This is such an important section.
They list specific verbs that appear in the essay prompts. Identify, describe, explain, compare, analyze, evaluate, justify.
What's fascinating here is the rigid mechanics of the grading rubric itself. The authors pull back the curtain on how graders operate.
And what do they find?
Graders are not reading your essay looking for general brilliance. They're practically acting as algorithms following a strict script. They assign points based entirely on whether you satisfied the specific requirement of the task verb in the prompt.
Can you give an example of how that plays out? Because the text makes it sound like you could write a great essay and still fail.
You absolutely can, and that is the danger the blueprint is trying to help you avoid. Let's say a free response question asks you to analyze the impact of the War of 1812.
Okay, analyze.
According to the rubric rules the authors lay out, the verb analyze requires you to show complex cause and effect, or deep relationships. If you write a historically flawless, beautifully written paragraph that simply lists the dates, the generals, and the outcome of the battles...
Well, analyzed it.
Exactly. You have effectively answered a describe prompt. But the prompt asked for analyze. Because you did not demonstrate the specific skill requested by the task verb, the grader will give you 0 points for that section.
Wow.
They cannot give you credit for a skill you did not demonstrate, no matter how true your facts are.
0 points for a historically accurate answer just because you missed the nuance of the verb? That is terrifying, but it also shows why the strategy-first approach is so vital.
Without a doubt.
The authors recommend using these task verbs as a literal mental checklist during the time tests. You look at the prompt, you physically circle the verb, and as you write, you ask yourself, am I actually evaluating or am I just identifying?
It converts abstract rubric requirements into actionable steps, and that naturally bridges to the next crucial phase of the blueprint strategy.
What happens when you inevitably get things wrong on these practice tests?
Exactly. Once you take these simulated exams and practice applying those task verbs, you are going to make mistakes. The text asks, what do you actually do with those mistakes?
Yes, and this introduces what the guide dramatically titles the secret weapon. It is the error log system.
The error log.
The premise is that you don't just score your practice exam, sigh at the bad grade, and move on. You must record every single mistake. And you have to categorize your errors into 4 distinct buckets: content, timing, misreading, or calculation.
Those 4 buckets are key.
But let's ground this. What does it actually look like for a learner staring at a graded practice test?
Let's create a scenario based on the Blueprints framework. Imagine you are reviewing your practice exam and you missed question 14. You look at the error log. Why did you miss it?
Right, digging into the why.
Did you simply not know the date the treaty was signed? If so, that goes into the content bucket. The solution is to go back to your flashcards.
Make a new Anki card.
Exactly. But what if you missed question 45 because you had exactly 30 seconds left and you panicked and guessed blindly? That is a timing error.
And more flashcards won't fix that.
Right. Reviewing more content won't fix a timing error. You need to do more timed drills to fix your pacing.
Okay, what about the other 2 buckets? Misreading and calculation.
Suppose you missed a question because the prompt asked, which of the following is not a cause? And your brain skipped right over the word not T.
Oh, the classic misread.
It happens all the time. That goes into the misreading bucket. The actionable fix there is to start physically underlining key qualifiers in the prompts.
And calculation.
Finally, calculation errors are exactly what they sound like. Maybe you were taking AP Chemistry, you knew the formula perfectly, but you dropped a 0 in the final math step.
So frustrating.
It is, but it goes in the calculation bucket, signaling that you need to slow down your scratchpad work. By revisiting this log, you begin to understand the specific type of mistake you are prone to making.
You see the pattern.
Yes. Once you recognize your own personal pattern of failure, you can systematically prevent yourself from repeating it.
It takes all the emotion and shame out of a bad score and turns it into pure, actionable data. That is incredibly empowering.
It really reframes the whole process.
But of course, the authors also acknowledge a basic physical reality. You can have the perfect error log, a masterful CED checklist, and all the Anki flashcards in the world, but your brain is a biological organ that requires maintenance.
We are machines.
No, we aren't. The blueprint concludes with an energy and focus strategy. They highly recommend managing study blocks using the Pomodoro technique. That's 25 minutes of highly focused, uninterrupted study, followed immediately by a 5-minute break.
And this touches on a fundamental biological truth that the authors are trying to enforce. They firmly advise against the classic student tradition of marathon cramming.
Staying up until 3 in the morning.
Right. Staying up until 3 a.m. to read a textbook for 6 hours straight is demonstrably counterproductive. The text insists that quality definitively beats quantity.
Because your brain just stops absorbing it.
Completely. Short, high-focus sessions where you are actively retrieving information are vastly superior to long, distracted sessions where your cognitive load is maxed out and you are just staring at the page.
It makes total sense.
Furthermore, the guide treats sleep, nutrition, and exercise not as luxuries you sacrifice for test prep, but as biological requirements. Your brain simply cannot process, store, or retrieve complex information if the physical engine running it is entirely depleted.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring all these threads together for you listening right now. If we look at the totality of the strategic blueprint for AP exam mastery, the core message is that conquering a massive body of complex information is not about punishing yourself.
No, it's not a test of suffering.
It is about systemizing your approach. It means mapping the architecture of the exam using the CED. It means ditching the passive highlighters for active recall and teaching concepts out loud.
Simulating the conditions.
Yes, simulating the real pressure, understanding the strict language of the grading rubric, and tracking your specific errors like a data scientist.
It fundamentally comes down to applied critical thinking. By stepping back and analyzing exactly how you are being tested, by looking at the structure of the game rather than just drowning in the substance of the textbook, you take control of the information overload.
You become the strategist.
You dictate the terms of your engagement with the material, rather than letting the sheer volume of it overwhelm you before you even sit down at the desk.
I think that is a fantastic summation of the author's points. And it brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We've been discussing this strictly in the context of AP exams and the specific study mechanics outlined in this blueprint. But think about the broader implications of this mindset.
It goes way beyond high school.
It really does. If treating a standardized test like a strategic game where you analyze the underlying rubric, figure out what the evaluators actually want, and focus all your energy only on high-yield actions yields such powerful results. Imagine how applying this exact same strategy-first, rubric-hacking mindset could change your trajectory elsewhere.
That's a great point.
What if you applied this to how you navigate your future college courses? or how you position yourself for promotions in your career. Imagine hacking the rubric of negotiating your first major salary by figuring out exactly what task verbs your future employer is secretly grading you on.
Once you see the systems, you can't unsee them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The applications are practically limitless once you train yourself to look for the rules of the game. So, whether you use this specific blueprint or not, keep that strategic mindset, build your systems, figure out your error patterns, teach your family some concepts, and conquer your goals. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.